If you want to see justice served after nearly 6 decades of waiting, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story will shake you to your core. On March 18, 1964, just after 1 in the afternoon, a 38-year-old man named Takeshi Yamamoto drove his small truck down a dirt path off Yokohama Industrial Road in the Kanagawa district, just northwest of the city. The path led to an abandoned quarry turned illegal dumping ground. Yamamoto was there to dispose of construction debris. But when he parked, stepped out, and walked to the edge of the embankment, he saw something 26 feet down among the refuse. A small, lifeless body. Yamamoto didn't dump the debris. He immediately got back in his truck and drove straight to the nearest police station. When authorities from the Kanagawa Prefectural Police arrived at the quarry to investigate what they saw, I do not wish to describe. The remains were identified to be that of Maura Kawama, a 9-year-old girl who had gone missing earlier that day. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, the pathologist at Yokohama General Hospital, later performed the autopsy and concluded that the body had been violated and that the cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation. And before we go any further, smash that like button, because you need to hear how this impossible case was finally solved. Investigators needed to find whoever did this as soon as possible before they acted again. This manhunt would involve over 250 investigators who traveled tens of thousands of kilometers and interviewed more than 9,000 people. Along the way, they would uncover a disturbing number of predators, each seemingly capable of the crime. But no definitive evidence pointed to which one was actually responsible for Maura's death. For nearly 6 decades, the murder of Maura Kawama remained in the shadows, unresolved, even as notorious killers around the world were brought to justice. As it would turn out, during the 6-decade-long investigation, detectives had in fact crossed paths with the man they were searching for, but they didn't realize it. That was until the case was cracked by a teenager with an extraordinary mind for puzzles who saw what no one else could. And thanks to him, Maura's family would finally have justice. Maura Kawama was born on November 23, 1954 in Yokohama, Japan. She was the daughter of Kenji and Yuki Kawama. The Kawamas had 5 children. Their home was a small apartment at 533 Sakura Street, right next to the Kawama family store, a humble corner shop that Kenji owned and operated. Maura, even at just 9 years old, helped her father at the store, arranging merchandise, handling small transactions, and always greeting customers with a quiet, shy smile. She was small, barely 23 kilograms, but quick and efficient. A little mother, her relatives called her, because she was constantly helping around the house. As a student at Sacred Heart Elementary School, Maura attended morning prayers every day. She was a member of the Junior Buddhist Youth Association, and when she played dress-up at home, it wasn't as a pop star or actress. It was as a shrine maiden, hands clasped, a white cloth draped over her head. Her dream was to serve at the temple. Her brother Hiroshi would later say she was always smiling. Her aunt called her an angel. To everyone who knew her, she was the picture of innocence, quiet, thoughtful, and kind. On the morning of March 18, 1964, when the streets of Yokohama were just beginning to stir, Maura was getting ready for school. But that day wasn't just any other. It was a special ceremony day, a celebration for one of the teachers at her school. And Maura had packed 2 containers of fruit to bring as a gift. Normally, she walked to school with her brother and sister, but not today. She wanted to be early so she could deliver her gift before the 8 o'clock assembly. She was afraid of stray dogs, which is one of the reasons she never walked alone. But today, she wanted to be brave just so she could show her appreciation to her teacher. So for the first time, she left home on her own. But she would never make it to school, and Yokohama would never be the same again. Subscribe now if you want to know how an 18-year-old solved what police couldn't in 57 years. The news of Maura's murder shook the entire community of Yokohama to its core. Crowds poured into Sakura Funeral Hall. Hundreds came to pay their respects. The junior Buddhist youth gathered to chant sutras for her. Her classmates, teachers, and families from Sacred Heart Temple showed up for the funeral ceremony. As the small white coffin was carried through the hall, her mother, Yuki, wept into Kenji's arms. Before the coffin was closed for the final time, she bent down and gave her daughter one last kiss. Inspector Tanaka put it simply, whether you liked it or not, the way you lived changed after March 18, 1964, in Yokohama. Takashi Sato, who served as district prosecutor in the 80s, was just a high school student at the time of the murder. But even then, he could feel it, how the fear spread through the city like smoke. I remember everyone talking about it at school, in the neighborhoods. Parents were just going crazy with worry about their kids, he said, and that never really went away. This was the first crime of this kind in Yokohama history, and for many people in the community, it shattered the illusion of safety, the belief that that kind of thing doesn't happen here. But after this, parents started walking their children to school more often. Doors locked before sundown. Community watch groups were formed specifically to protect children. Police patrols around schools increased, and over time, it became clear that Maura's murder had forever shifted the atmosphere of the city. During the start of the manhunt for Maura's killer, police began canvassing the area. They questioned everyone. They conducted door-to-door interviews throughout Maura's neighborhood. They checked known offenders. They pulled attendance records from the high school and spoke with students across Yokohama. Every girl was asked, "Have any strangers ever approached you since school began this year?" Police traced the route Maura would have walked. The last confirmed sighting was by her cousin, Miss Maura Kawama, who had seen her walking eastbound on Sakura Street, just west of Temple Road, at about 8:10 in the morning. That's roughly 5 minutes after she left home. Her brother and sister had left only a few minutes after her, and somehow that was enough for them to never see her again. Was it someone passing through the district, or worse, a local? Someone who knew the area well, knew about the quarry, knew when children walked to school. Potentially someone Maura might have trusted, or at least not feared. Hit that like button right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. On March 24, 1964, less than a week after Maura's murder, Yokohama police detained a 44-year-old man named Koji Matsuda on a vagrancy charge. He had wandered into the station looking for a place to sleep and casually mentioned he was originally from the Kanagawa area. That was enough to raise alarms. When questioned by both local and prefectural police, Matsuda claimed he had been in Osaka on the day Maura's body was found. Still, authorities weren't quick to dismiss him. He was held in detention for 30 days while investigators combed through his background. Matsuda, who lived in a makeshift shelter, made ends meet doing odd jobs and had spent time in psychiatric facilities in Kobe. But after an exhaustive review, Nothing connected him to the crime. Then, in the early hours of March 25, 1964, District Police apprehended a man prowling near the residential area. A suspected voyeur, later identified as Taro Suzuki, a delivery driver from Nagoya, picked up near the shopping district. Suzuki claimed he was just walking around, but the police weren't taking any chances. He was questioned and turned over to investigators. Suzuki insisted he had been out of the prefecture, driving routes in Nagoya and Kyoto on the day of Maura's murder. That alibi was checked and confirmed. Though he pleaded guilty to the prowling charge and was fined, there was no link to Maura's case. Another shadowy figure interrogated, fingerprinted, and ultimately released. Then, on March 27, 1964, just 9 days after Maura Kawama's murder, police arrested 35-year-old Akira Ito near a local park after a disturbing eyewitness report. He had been approaching young girls in the area, asking them strange questions. One of those girls came forward, triggering Ito's arrest on public indecency charges. He hadn't shown up for work the day of the murder, which deepened suspicion, but when questioned in connection to Maura's case, Ito had an alibi, and it held up. His family posted bail, and though his actions were unsettling to say the least, Ito was officially cleared. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because this case takes an unbelievable turn. Then, on April 1, 1964, 2 weeks after Maura's murder, police brought in 29-year-old Masato Yamada, a former restaurant worker, after he confessed to killing Maura Kawama. At first, it seemed credible. He knew details like the clothing she was wearing and what school she attended. But that information had already been published in the newspapers. Investigators were cautious. They let him go, but kept him under surveillance. Days later, Yamada was picked up again, this time for public intoxication. Behind the outburst was something darker. Yamada was deeply depressed and later admitted that he didn't kill Maura. He just wanted to die. Too afraid to take his own life, he believed a murder conviction would result in execution. A polygraph test confirmed his confession was false. It was another disheartening moment in a case that seemed full of them, where grief echoed not only from the victim's family, but sometimes from the broken people caught in the margins. Then, on April 2, 1964, just over 2 weeks after Maura Kawama's murder, another young girl had a chilling encounter. A 14-year-old student was walking to meet a friend near the train station when she spotted a man standing by a telephone pole. He moved toward her, grabbed her by the shoulders, and told her, "Don't be afraid." But the girl fought back. She pushed him away, kicked him, and ran screaming until she reached a nearby shop. She reported her attacker as a man with dark, wavy hair wearing a brown jacket, but he vanished before police could arrive. The attack happened just blocks from where Maura's body had been found. Some wondered, was this the same man striking again, or just a terrifying coincidence? Make sure you're subscribed, because the investigation is about to get even more intense. Then, on April 6, 1964, just days after that attack, police made an arrest. 20-year-old Ryota Nakano, a local resident, was taken into custody. He matched the girl's description: dark, wavy hair, a brown jacket, and lived near Sacred Heart School where Maura had studied. He pleaded guilty to grabbing the girl by the shoulders and was charged with assault. But as more details emerged, the story changed. Nakano later explained he had gone to the area to meet someone. When plans fell through, he mistook the 14-year-old for an acquaintance and allegedly followed her to explain. She understandably terrified, fled. Though his actions were strange, the district court ultimately cleared him. No connection to Maura's death was ever found. It was a case of mistaken identity at the worst possible moment, when a grieving community was desperate for justice and suspicion was thick in the air. Then on April 14, 1964, nearly a month after Maura's murder, police arrested 40-year-old Satoshi Kobayashi, someone who lived disturbingly close to the Kawama home. His address was on the same street. Kobayashi had just pleaded guilty to indecency charges involving two young boys from the neighborhood, ages 10 and 11. Given the nature of his crime and his proximity to the victim, police moved quickly. He was questioned at length about his whereabouts on March 18th, the day Maura disappeared. But despite the timing and location, Kobayashi provided an alibi that held up under scrutiny. He was sent to detention on his original charges, but investigators found no link between him and Maura's murder. Still, the arrest shook the community. Just how many disturbed individuals were lurking in their city? The answer, far more than they had ever imagined. Drop a like right now if this story is gripping you as much as it's gripping me. On May 19, 1964, nearly 2 months after Maura Kawama was killed, Kanagawa Prefectural Police released the first composite sketch of a man they believed could be connected to her disappearance. The sketch was based on eyewitness reports of an adult male, balding, thin with a gaunt face and a sharp expression. He was seen around 8 o'clock in the morning on the day Maura vanished, driving south on Sakura Street, turning left onto 4th Avenue, then parking between the shopping district and Temple Road. That's the last stretch Maura was known to have walked. The timing was eerie, the location exact, and this man vanished. Police urged anyone who recognized him to come forward. Then, on May 20th, 1964, just a day after the release of the first suspect sketch, Prefectural Police published another. Witnesses reported seeing a man between 8:45 and 9 o'clock in the morning on the day Maura was killed, driving a light green older sedan down a dirt road leading away from the very site where her body was discovered hours later. The man was described as middle-aged, with a round, fleshy face, graying hair, wearing glasses and a cap. The timing, the location, the path, it all aligned too closely. For investigators, this man wasn't just a driver. He might have been the last person to leave that desolate road before it became a crime scene. Released on May 22, 1964, the third sketch in the Maura Kawama investigation depicted another man wanted for questioning, not for loitering, but for something far more disturbing. According to police, this man had entered a woman's home near Maura's neighborhood under false pretenses and attempted to assault her. She escaped, reported the incident, and later saw him again, still lingering in the same area just days later. He was described as around 25 years old, slender but not thin, neatly dressed, soft-spoken, and clean-cut. On the surface, he looked ordinary, but his actions suggested something darker. The incident sent yet another ripple of fear through the community. Was this yet another predator? Or could he be the one they were looking for? All they could do was wait and hope that time would tell. Subscribe if you haven't already, because you won't believe who the killer turned out to be. The fourth and final composite sketch, released on May 22, 1964, featured a man whose presence felt more deliberate, more practiced. Witnesses reported seeing him every morning for 2 weeks. parked in the same faded dark sedan along Sakura Street between the shopping district and Temple Road, the same stretch where Maura Kawama was last seen alive. He was described as middle-aged, with a rough-lined face, graying dark hair, and the build of a heavy-set working man, shabby in appearance. His unsettling routine continued until March 18th. That day, he was in his usual spot, watching, and by the afternoon, Maura was gone, and the watcher was never seen again. This made him one of the most quietly unsettling figures in the investigation. Then, on July 6, 1964, nearly 4 months after Maura Kawama's murder, another young girl, just 9 years old, narrowly escaped what could have been a second tragedy. While walking alone near the residential district, the child was approached by a man who pulled his dark sedan to the curb. She ran quickly toward the main street, looking back only once to see the car speeding away. She told police the man was short, heavy-set, wore glasses, and was middle-aged. A description that matched sketch number 2, the man seen driving away from the abandoned quarry in a similar dark car. No one else witnessed the attempt. No license plate, no name, just the voice of a girl who had narrowly avoided sharing the same fate as Maura Kawama. On May 13, 1965, the investigation into Maura Kawama's murder took a chilling and irreversible turn. Haruto Nishimura, a 51-year-old local man, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. He lived just over a block from the Kawama home. Nishimura had been questioned early in the investigation after reportedly exposing himself to children on multiple occasions. During his interview with police, Nishimura initially claimed he hadn't left the house the morning Maura disappeared, but then he slipped. Casually, he commented on how cold it had been outside that morning, a detail he shouldn't have known unless he had been out there. Investigators asked him to come back in to take a polygraph test. Nishimura agreed, but on the day of the test, he never showed up. Instead, police found him in his apartment, dead from an apparent suicide by hanging. Too many on the investigative team. It felt like a confession. A man on the brink of being exposed, choosing death over accountability. But without the polygraph, a confession, or any direct physical evidence, there was nothing prosecutors could do. Haruto Nishimura became both the most suspicious figure in the case and the one who got away. He seemed to be the closest they had come to catching Maura's killer. And in just about the most suspicious way possible, he vanished forever. Hit that like button if you think justice should never expire. Then on August 25, 1964, 5 months after Maura Kawama's death, police pursued a lead that took them far from Yokohama to Osaka. There, a man had walked into a police station and confessed to killing a teenage girl in Tokyo. Given the brutality of the crime and his willingness to admit guilt, investigators couldn't ignore the possibility that he might also be tied to the Kawama case. A detective was dispatched to question him, but after a full interview, the results were clear. The man had never been to Yokohama. He had no connection to Maura, her family, or the district. His confession was real, but it belonged to a different crime. For Maura's case, it was yet another door that opened only to slam shut in the investigators' faces. Then on March 12, 1965, nearly a year after Maura Kawama's death, prefectural police followed up on yet another lead, this one from a psychiatric facility. A patient there claimed he had taken a religious charm from the child's body. Investigators knew that this detail had not been reported in the newspapers. and Maura's parents even confirmed she had owned a charm like the one the patient had described. However, they also revealed that Maura hadn't worn it the day she left home for the last time. The chain had broken, and she left it at home, where it remained in the family's possession. While this was one of the more eerie leads in the case, all it proved was a reminder that not every confession is genuine. Nevertheless, no matter how wild the claim, no matter how unreliable its source, each one had to be checked. Because in a case this unresolved, any detail might lead them closer to catching the killer who, as far as they knew, was still out there. In 1985, more than 2 decades after Maura's murder, a suspect surfaced. 59-year-old Kenji Watanabe was arrested on charges involving multiple boys. He was already a known predator with a long and disturbing history that included time in prison and psychiatric institutions. But it was what police found in his home that truly shook them. His small apartment yielded boxes of evidence. Among the items discovered, articles and magazines about crimes against minors, disturbing materials, newspaper clippings about Maura Kawama's murder, stored among other illegal content. The implied connection was there. This wasn't just a man with a sick obsession. This was someone who had fixated on Maura's case for years, keeping her memory buried inside the most depraved corners of his home. For a moment, investigators thought this nightmare might finally have a name. Subscribe now, because the real breakthrough is coming, and it's mind-blowing. In court, Watanabe was visibly unstable. He acted erratically and insisted he belonged in a hospital, not a jail. And when his bail was set higher than expected, he spiraled further, threatening self-harm. But in the end, nothing connected him to her case. No confession, no witnesses, no physical evidence linking him to the crime. In 1986, Watanabe was officially ruled out. Another disturbing figure discarded as a suspect. Another terrifying truth uncovered, but still no justice. The Kanagawa Prefectural Police would revisit the Kawama case annually. They collected and preserved evidence. They tried to match DNA from bodily fluid left on Maura's clothing by the murderer once the technology became available. But it led nowhere. No match ever came up in the National DNA Database. And through it all, the file drawers kept filling. 9,000 contacts made, over 4,700 pages of police reports, tens of thousands of kilometers traveled by over 250 investigators across nearly 6 decades, and still nothing. The city changed. People moved away. Memories faded. But the Kawama family never stopped hoping. Maura's siblings, now adults with families of their own, kept her memory alive. They gave interviews, shared her story. They never asked for revenge, just the truth. But eventually, that seemed impossible. For nearly 6 decades, Maura's mother, Yuki Kawama, lived with the quiet ache of a wound that never healed. She had been the one to see Maura off that morning, the one who later wept as her daughter's small white coffin was carried through Sacred Heart Temple, and for the rest of her life, she carried unresolved grief. Yuki was a seamstress, a devoted temple member, a woman who loved her garden, her tea ceremonies, and the simple joys of being with family. She worked at a local textile factory. Later, she helped run Kawama Transportation, the family business. Her husband, Kenji Kawama, passed in 2006. He had run the family store, the small shop next door to their home on Sakura Street. He died, never knowing who had taken his daughter. Then Yuki passed away in 2014 at the age of 90, 8 years before anyone would know the name and face of the man responsible. But neither of them ever gave up hope. Neither of them stopped being Maura's parents. And even as the decades passed and the trail grew colder, their family never stopped believing that one day someone would find the truth. And it turns out they were right. But I don't think they would have ever guessed that someone would be a teenager. It was February 2020 when the Kanagawa Prefectural Police received an email that at first glance probably seemed a little odd. It came from an 18-year-old university student named Eric Tanaka. "Hello, my name is Eric. I do genealogical research. I've seen the cold case involving Maura Kawama and the unidentified DNA. I may be able to help." Eric didn't work for the police. He didn't have a doctorate. He wasn't even old enough to drink legally. But what he did have was a gift, a sharp, analytical mind that could do something most people couldn't even begin to understand. Some cases he solved in under 10 minutes. Others took months. But for Eric, it was never about speed. It was about precision. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because Eric's story is just getting started. Even as a kid, Eric's brain worked differently. He didn't just memorize facts. He organized them, cataloged them. His mother introduced genealogy to him to keep him occupied since he was always at home. And in just 2 weeks, he had mastered it. He began tracing family trees for fun. First his own, then his neighbors, then strangers. At 18 years old, he had already spent 10 years honing his skills in genealogy. But Eric wasn't satisfied with family histories. He wanted to solve real-world mysteries. That opportunity came just before he graduated high school, when a police department brought him onto a case he still can't speak about. He cracked it, and that sealed it for him. Forensic genealogy was his path. In February 2020, he started reaching out to departments across the country. One of those emails landed in the inbox of Inspector Kenji Yoshida of the Kanagawa Prefectural Police, offering his services free of charge. Included in the email was a link to Eric Tanaka's website that, along with a history of his work and testimonials from past clients, displayed a photo of himself. Inspector Yoshida stated in an interview, "And I mean no disrespect by this, but he looked like a teenager. And I thought to myself, I get a lot of emails every day. Could this be real?" Despite his reservations, Yoshida decided to give the young man a chance and invited Eric in for a meeting. When it came time to meet the investigators, Eric treated it like a job interview. He wasn't there to impress them with words. He brought results. Armed with 10 years of genealogical experience, despite being only 18, he handed over references from 2 different police departments he had already helped on other cases. He plainly told the investigators, "I can help solve this case." When speaking about that moment in the interview, Inspector Yoshida says he wasn't being cocky when he said that. He was being confident. And there was something about that confidence in an 18-year-old who shows up drinking juice, giving us his credentials, showing us his work. It was impressive. Needless to say, at that moment, they believed that Eric was the real deal, a prodigy sitting right in front of them. For the first time in a long time, hope wasn't just a word. It had a face. It had a name. Eric. Hit like right now if you believe one person can change everything. They didn't hand him the entire case file, of course, but they gave him what mattered. A partial DNA sample from the suspect and a few potential matches. That was more than enough for Eric to dive in. The DNA sample came from the crime scene in 1964, bodily fluid left on Maura's clothing. It had been preserved for decades, but it had never matched anyone in the National DNA Database. Eric Tanaka, however, didn't need the killer's DNA to be in the database in order for him to solve this mystery. And what made this possible now wasn't just Eric's skills and determination, it was science and technology. When Maura was murdered in 1964, DNA testing didn't exist. Not until the late 1980s did DNA evidence begin to be used in Japanese courts. And even then, the technology was primitive. It couldn't do what was needed here. But in the 2010s, the rise of forensic genealogy changed everything. For the first time, it allowed investigators to trace DNA through families, reaching people who had never committed a crime but were related to someone who had. This was the science Eric used, a brand new frontier of criminal justice that wasn't even imaginable when the investigation into Maura's murder began in 1964. He uploaded the profile to international genealogy databases, public platforms used by people building family trees. Suddenly, Eric was looking at thousands of partial matches, not direct relatives, distant cousins, descendants of someone the killer was also related to. Each person on that match list had to be researched individually. Where did they live? Who were their grandparents? Did their family tree overlap with any others? If two partial DNA matches shared a common ancestor, that meant the killer was probably descended from that same ancestor too. One by one, Eric started building family trees, connecting cousins, finding shared lines, eliminating dead ends, tracking marriages, births, siblings, hundreds of names, dozens of false starts. It was like trying to find one person in a forest by studying shadows. It's not just science, Eric said. It's instinct. You have to feel your way through the connections. When he reached a manageable list, Eric handed it over to investigators. Detectives took the names and used traditional detective work, looking at birth dates, criminal records, residences, and timelines to eliminate those who couldn't have been involved. They cut it down even further. Finally, just 4 men remained, and only one of them was still alive. Subscribe right now because you need to hear how they finally caught him. Undercover officers were sent to stake out the man's residence, waiting for him to put out trash so they could retrieve something to pull a DNA sample from. But after a few days of waiting with still no trash on the curb, they decided to just talk to the man. After explaining the situation of the case and asking the man if he would be willing to give a sample for testing, the man agreed. And after testing, his DNA wasn't a 100% match. But that didn't end the trail. Instead, it pointed investigators toward his 2 brothers, and one of them fit everything. He had lived within walking distance of Maura's home back in 1964, and he had a documented criminal past. Each suspect had their moment under the spotlight. Each one seemed possible. Each one was ruled out, and in the end, it wasn't any of them or any of the named men that filled over 1,000 pages of police reports. But it was someone they had encountered before. Someone who had crossed paths with law enforcement multiple times. Someone who didn't hide. He just never stood out. But he should have. The final name was Takeshi Hayashi, a 22-year-old bartender in Yokohama at the time of the murder. He lived 6 blocks from Maura's home and directly across from the cemetery where she was later buried. But they couldn't come to a definitive conclusion that Takeshi Hayashi had been Maura's killer on Eric's work alone. They needed proof. So the prefectural police did something rare and controversial. They filed a request to exhume Takeshi Hayashi's body. A few months later, from deep beneath the soil, the truth finally came to light. Hayashi's DNA was a perfect match to the sample found on Maura's clothing nearly 60 years earlier. When we got the call, there were no cheers. One officer said, "There was just silence." Then someone whispered, "We got him." Drop a like if you believe justice can never come too late. When the name Takeshi Hayashi was finally revealed to the public in 2022, many in Yokohama reacted the same way. Who? It was a name that had never appeared on the long list of suspects chased down over the decades, and yet he had been there all along. Hayashi had grown up in Yokohama. He graduated from Yokohama High School in 1959. In his yearbook photo, he looked like any other clean-cut teenager of the time. His caption said he was interested in sports, but that his future was undecided. He didn't go far. In the 1960s and 70s, he lived on Sakura Street. He also had addresses within a kilometer of the Kawama home. The apartment he once lived in was demolished in a redevelopment project in 2003, long after Hayashi had died. He was never married, never had children, no stable job that lasted. He floated. But there was a darkness in him. Although Takeshi Hayashi had never appeared in the long list of suspects chased down by police over the decades, his image may have. As you may recall, back in 1964, police had released several sketches of unidentified men wanted for questioning after acting suspiciously around Yokohama in the days and hours surrounding Maura's murder. One of those sketches, sketch number 3, was of a man who had reportedly entered a local woman's home under false pretenses and attempted to assault her. Now, take a look at the sketch next to Takeshi Hayashi's high school photo. Now, there's no way to know for sure if this is the same man, but the resemblance is eerie. Both men were around the same age. Both had dark, full hair combed back. Both had a long, narrow jawline and pronounced cheekbones. Even their eyebrows and nose shape seemed to match. While police have never publicly commented on any similarities between Takeshi Hayashi and the man in sketch number 3, and this comparison is only speculation, it raises a haunting possibility. Did they have the killer in their sights all along and just didn't know it? If sketch number 3 was indeed Takeshi Hayashi, it means the investigation came incredibly close to catching him almost 60 years earlier. And it makes what happened later in 1974 feel even heavier, because perhaps if someone had made the connection when the sketch was originally released, another victim may have been spared. In April of 1974, 10 years after Maura was killed, Takeshi Hayashi was arrested by the Kanagawa Prefectural Police. The charge, aggravated assault. According to the report, Hayashi had taken a 23-year-old woman to a bar near Sakura Street, very close to the Kawama residence. They left around 4 in the morning, and he offered to drive her home. But instead of taking her home, he drove into a remote area, a wooded section in the hills, and forced himself on her. By sheer luck, another vehicle pulled up behind them. Hayashi panicked and drove off, but instead of taking the woman home, he dropped her at a corner in the city center. Disoriented and shaken, she called the police immediately. He was charged with serious offenses, even by 1970s standards. But he struck a plea deal. Only the aggravated assault charge stuck, and Hayashi walked away with probation. The more serious charges were quietly dropped in the plea deal according to newspaper reports. Subscribe if you want to see more stories of justice finally served. And still, Takeshi Hayashi allegedly didn't stop there. A woman named Yumi Tanaka came forward after the case was solved, bringing with her a chilling memory that haunted her for more than 5 decades. She was about 9 or 10 years old at the time, walking with a friend on Sakura Street, just blocks from where Maura had last been seen. A white car pulled up. The man inside leaned out the window and urged the girls to get in. "Come on, we'll give you a ride," he said. Yumi declined. He pressed again. No, come on. We'll give you a ride." Alarmed, the girls ran to a nearby shop and got help. The man drove off. At the time, no one connected the incident to the unsolved murder from years earlier. But when Takeshi Hayashi's face was revealed in 2022, Yumi couldn't believe it. According to her, it was the same man. "My memory is just so vivid," she said. "I'm still shaking. I mean, even just thinking about it." It seems as though Hayashi had kept circling the same streets, the same corners, waiting for another chance to do the unthinkable again. In 1978, Hayashi was arrested again, this time for reckless behavior, after neighbors reported a disturbance involving a weapon. Hayashi, along with 2 others, was charged, but that case went nowhere. The disposition is unknown, and still no one connected the dots. No one thought to look back to 1964. No one thought, could this be the same man? For nearly 2 decades after Maura Kawama's murder, Hayashi lived among the people of Yokohama. He lived across the street from the cemetery where her body was buried. He likely walked past the family store on Sakura Street, where Maura once helped stock shelves for her father. He likely saw her photos in newspapers, saw the decades of updates from investigators working tirelessly to find him, saw the pain, suffering, and fear that his actions brought upon his community, and said nothing. He died of a sudden heart attack at age 38 on May 16, 1980, while working at a local establishment. He was buried, mourned by few, forgotten by most, but not by DNA. When Kanagawa Prefectural Police finally held the press conference in 2022 to name Maura's killer, it was filled with reporters, microphones, camera crews, and the people who mattered most, Maura's surviving siblings. They had waited nearly 6 decades for this moment, and when they spoke, it wasn't with anger, it was with quiet dignity. "We never sought revenge," one sibling said, "only truth, only justice." They thanked the investigators. They thanked Eric Tanaka. They thanked everyone who had refused to let this case be forgotten. But mostly, they remembered Maura. Hit that like button one more time if this story moved you. Inspector Yamamoto, the man who inherited the case in 2017, became emotional as he addressed the crowd. "We're told not to get attached to cases," he said, wiping tears. "But how can you not get attached to this one?" He revealed that the Kawama case had become one of the oldest cold cases in Japanese history, to be solved through genetic genealogy, and he gave all credit to those who came before him. More than 20 members of the department had been in charge of the case since 1964. Over 4,700 documents were generated. Generations of officers kept coming back to it, hoping for one clue, one break, one answer. And finally, they had it. The resolution of the Kawama case was more than just a victory for science. It was a statement that no matter how long ago a crime was committed, the truth still matters. That victims don't get forgotten, not if the right people keep asking the right questions. And that sometimes justice isn't swift, but it can still be delivered. Today, The Kawama case is now part of a growing list of cold cases being cracked open, not by guns or badges, but by DNA, genealogy, and diligent investigators like Eric Tanaka with a computer and determination. Dozens of other cases have since followed, and investigators across the country now work side by side with genealogists like Eric to find the names no one else could. Maura's case was proof of concept and a rallying cry. When asked what made this case different, Eric Tanaka didn't talk about the DNA or the family tree or the late nights staring at data. He talked about Maura. She did something kind that morning, he said. She wanted to bring fruit to her teacher. She just wanted to do something good. And I think that's what stuck with me the most. She deserved better. And if I could help in any way to give her that, then how could I not? He doesn't consider himself a hero, just someone who knew how to follow the connections, a puzzle solver. But to Maura's family, he was something much more than that. All this time, the Kawama family had lived with the weight of uncertainty, the constant background hum of grief. And while they had learned to live around it, that wound had never closed. But now, they had a name, a face, an answer. For the first time since that terrible day in March 1964, they knew who had taken their sister. At the press conference, Maura's surviving siblings stood together, speaking softly but firmly about what the moment meant. "We have so many precious memories of Maura," one said. "But at the same time, our family will always feel the emptiness and sorrow of her absence. Consequently, we will continue to ask ourselves, what would have been? What could have been?" Our parents expressed their sentiments a long time ago, Hiroshi Kawama added. They didn't want punishment or revenge. They wanted justice. Their parents, Yuki and Kenji Kawama, had both passed away before the case was solved. They had lived their lives without ever knowing who killed their daughter. And now, standing there, their children carried their hopes forward. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story like this. The family also made sure to personally thank law enforcement, and especially the team who had never stopped working the case. Over the past 58 years, the Kanagawa Prefectural Police have continuously worked this case, Hiroshi said. And a special thanks to the team. Our family thanks you so much. And then, of course, they thanked the young man who had made the final breakthrough, the teenager who had shown up with nothing but a mind for puzzles and a heart for justice, Eric Tanaka. Everything that had to go right did, Eric said, reflecting later. We just kept working with these really small DNA samples until we got the answer, which we did with Mr. Hayashi. But it wasn't full closure, not completely. As Hiroshi Kawama said, "I don't have closure that it's all behind me. We're all going to have memories of that horrible day." But for the first time in 58 years, the family had the truth. Takeshi Hayashi didn't face a courtroom. He never had to look the Kawama family in the eye, never had to explain himself, never had to speak her name. He died in 1980, still a free man, never having faced concrete consequences for his actions. But justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it just means answers. And for the Kawama family, for Yokohama, and for everyone who kept this case alive for 58 years, that answer was enough. Yokohama is not the same place it was in 1964. The city has changed. The stores have changed. The names on the buildings are different. Even the family store is long gone. But the story of Maura Kawama remains etched in its heart. For every child that walks to school, for every parent that cares for their children, for every detective with or without a badge who refuses to give up, she matters. If you enjoyed this story, then consider hitting the subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss another incredible case. It's the best thing you can do to help us keep making more of them.